Hi everyone, and welcome to our Story Terrace webinar. I can see that people are already still joining, so we'll give everyone a moment to join and then we'll start in a minute. We've got a wonderful panel for you today with people from various places in the world. I'd love to know where you're all from, so please let us know in the chat. For me personally, working with people from all around the world is one of my favorite things about Story Terrace. It means you get to listen to so many different stories from loads of different types of people. Also, so speaking of stories, have any of you actually started your bookmaking journey yet? If you have, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you as well. Oh, wonderful. We've got lots of people from around the world. Wow. From London to Ireland, Cyprus, Minnesota, Bristol, fantastic. And North Wales. Great. So it seems like the UK is definitely representing here. And even Canada, fantastic. Really, really great to hear. Okay. Wow. Lots of people, fantastic. Okay. All right. Okay, so it looks like we're ready to begin. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Story Terrace's 1 hour special webinar in which we'll take you through our exciting process and we'll go over what you can expect. It's a really fun journey, and I hope by the end of the webinar you'll want to join us. We'll have members of our team ready to answer any questions that you have, so please feel free to use the Q&A box. Okay. So before we start, I thought I'd introduce myself. My name is Priya Visavadia and I'll be your host for today. I've been working at Story Terrace as a project editor for almost a year now. I did my bachelor's degree in English language and culture and I did my master's degree in writing, editing and mediating. Before joining the awesome Story Terrace team, I worked as a freelance editor and writer for Dutch publishing house Nordhoff. I also have my own side business that specializes in academic editing. So I'm an editor through and through. Working at Story Terrace has meant that I can combine two things that I love, listening to other people's stories and editing. It's a really fun job and I thoroughly enjoy helping bring up wonderful stories to life. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you today our panelists. Here with me today, I've got our founder and CEO, Rutger Browning, and two of our fantastic senior writers, one from the UK, Angela Hindle, and one from the US, Jarron Camp. So let's start with Rutger. It's funny because Rutger and I have sort of swapped countries. He's a Rotterdammer who's moved to London and I'm a Londoner who's moved to Rotterdam. So it's nice that we've got that in common. Rutger, it's great to have you here. Would you mind telling us a bit about Story Terrace and the inspiration behind starting the company?
Yeah, that goes back actually quite a long time, a lot before starting Story Terrace, which now exists for 8 years. But actually when I was younger, when I was in school, my mom worked as an academic from home often, and that meant over the school holidays I would make a little bit too much noise for her to get into her papers and to really concentrate on those. So I spent a lot of time at my grandparents, which I really enjoyed. They're on the picture on the left here. And my grandfather was a great storyteller. We would play backgammon hour after hour. He would smoke cigars and he would tell me about the Second World War, where he started a small resistance group, about how he played sports, how he met my grandmother, how they moved to the Caribbean, where he worked as a doctor. And all those stories, they seem to never stop, and there seem to always be more of them. And I listened to them intently, but after he passed away, those stories faded much, much quicker than I ever expected. And at the same time, I regretted I didn't ask my grandmother as many questions about her life as I had wanted to. She found it difficult to talk too much about her youth because she lost a lot of family in the war, but I still regretted that I never asked those questions. So from both angles, now I felt like I should have written their stories down, which I didn't do. And then it took many, many years from that realization and thinking through that problem, why we as a society don't capture those stories, to find a solution. And I only found that solution as I realized that so many incredible writers had become freelance as part of the changes to the media industry, but also because there were much more opportunities for freelancers to find work. So when I realized that, and I saw that so many writers with fantastic degrees, but also great publications were sort of available, I thought I could have a solution to help people around the world capture their stories forever.
Wow, fantastic. Well, that's a really lovely way to start a wonderful company. And I'm really enjoying working here as well. I see in the photograph, you've also got some pictures of Dragon's Den people as well. How has Story Terrace evolved since Dragon's Den then?
So yes, we were on Dragon's Den, which is the equivalent of, what's it called again in the US?
I think Shark Tank.
Shark Tank, yes, Shark Tank. So we were on that, which was really exciting experience for me personally, because well, if you're on TV and you're being grilled by 5 very well-known entrepreneurs for 1.5 hours, you definitely don't want to say too many stupid things. So I think I managed to avoid that. They were very enthusiastic about the product. We're working with one of them now, actually, on the book of a family member as well. And yeah, the company got a lot of exposure there, which really helped, because our mission is to make it possible for anyone to capture their story. And yeah, that really helped.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So thank you very much for some very insightful information. Now moving on to Angela. Angela is our senior writer based in the UK. Hi, Angela. Could you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yes, I have been a teacher for many years, which is brings a lot of skills with it, I hope. And I have been a hospital volunteer. You can see me on the photograph there with my dog. I have lots of hobbies where I love going out with him. We're about to walk the West Highland Way next week in Scotland, and do a lot of activities like golf and swimming. I'm married, got 3 children, try to keep young to be with them. And that there is a photograph of my father and I when I was about 4 at Bridlington, which is about an hour from where we live. And so we live in Yorkshire now, in York. And yes, I feel I've brought a lot of different skills to the writing world. I have written a lot of specialised in short stories now. I've written a couple of novels, I've written a lot of articles and magazine stories. And the best gift of all is to be able to write and capture stories for Story Terrace as a ghostwriter, which is very enjoyable. I've met some absolutely fantastic people.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Angela. And for you, Jarron, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into ghostwriting.
Well, I started writing as a teenager to help myself process some difficult things when I couldn't use sports as an outlet. And then I got my bachelor's in creative writing for entertainment and my master's in creative writing. And I wasn't sure how I was going to use my degree when we moved back to Ohio. And that's when I found Story Terrace. But we're a military family. My wife is retired Navy. She worked at the Pentagon for her last duty station. We have 4 children, ages 21, 13, 11, and 7. And I just believe that everybody has a story to tell. So when I got an opportunity to start ghostwriting, it was just amazing to meet so many different people from so many different backgrounds and hear their story and find a way to put their voice on paper.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. So now that you guys have met our panelists and you know them a little bit better, I'd like to move on to our process. So our unique process can be split into 5 key steps. Step number 1, the writer match. Step number 2, the interviews. Step number 3, writing and editing. Step number 4, the design. And step number 5, book delivery. I believe that there are 3 magic components to a successful book project, and they are the writer, the project editor, and of course you, the storyteller. How I like to describe the process is just like a book. The project editor's job is to ensure that everything runs smoothly, to be there to answer questions, to provide editorial feedback on the writing, and to help with the design stage in the process. See us project editors as the hand-woven covers that holds everything together, the writers as the pages in the books, and your story as the words. So this is the first step in our process, the bespoke writer match. Once you're assigned a project, the project editor will get in touch with you. Through a short introductory call, we get to know you a bit better, to hear a little bit about you, your background, some of your highlights in your life, and some of your interests. We'll then set you up on our in-house platform, Bookmaker. It's where you'll see your book come to life, where the writer will be able to upload drafts, you'll be able to upload photos, and you'll see the proof of your book. We'll also send out a questionnaire for you to fill in. The project editor will then use the Bookmaker database to search for a suitable writer. As project editors, we know our writer pool, and therefore we love that we are tasked with looking for the best possible writer for you. So that's what it's like from the project editor's perspective. Moving on to Rutger, could I ask you, what are the unique selling points of our Story Terrace writer match process?
Sorry, about the writer or anything else? Sorry, I didn't hear that very well.
Sorry, what are our unique selling points of our writer match process?
Okay. Well, we work with 700 different writers. So that means that we really genuinely match people with a writer that fits with their background. And then we talk about professional background, but also their cultural background. We look at people's personality. So we do a really thorough job. And if people want to be interviewed in person, because you can either be interviewed in person or remotely via video calls or phone calls, then of course we look at location so that we can match with someone close by. So we get requests of all sorts, what people find important in the writer match. And I'm really proud that we actually are always really able to deliver on that. The requests we get, for example, are also second language requirements. So some people would like to be interviewed in, or their parent maybe in Hebrew or in Mandarin or any language. And now we help facilitate with those things as well. So, and then we have writers with many different backgrounds and different experience levels as well. So there's really, really a large variety.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And what is it like from your side, Jarron, when you receive an email to, with a prospective project, how does it go for you?
Well, in the beginning, I would get a little bit of information about the storyteller, and I was asked to do a pitch, usually about 4 or 5 sentences, I believe, to sell myself as to why I would be a great fit to write their story. But lately, I noticed that I've already been picked usually by the storyteller. So the process has changed a little bit, and it's a little bit easier. But I always thought in the beginning that my matchups with the storytellers were going to be based off of whether or not I was a man or that I was African-American, something like that. But I noticed that everything goes into it. So if they have a love for sports, that helped me get the job. If they have a military background, that helped me get it too. So a lot of different things.
Oh, great. And what about you, Angela? How is it for you when you receive a project? Is it similar to Jarron's experience?
Yes, it is. It's a very exciting time. Immediately, as soon as you find any details about the customer, it's almost like conception. You're very proud to work with that person. You feel very protective of them. You feel on their side straight away. And you obviously see little things that you've got in common. You realise why you've been connected with each other, and you're already thinking of ways that you might be able to help them, inspire them to share their story. So yes, it is. It's a very precious moment right from the start. It's always a privilege, but even at that very moment, I suppose it's like when someone's first told they're having a baby. It's like, I'm going to look after you. I'm going to make sure you get the story, your story, out in the way you want. So straight away you have those vibes, and it really is a very special moment.
Definitely, that connection, it's really a really important one as well. Yeah. And what kind of topics do you discuss when you have the intro call, Jarron?
With the intro call, it's basically getting an idea of what story they want to tell. And then they usually ask me questions as far as why I think I'm a good fit, even though I might have done a pitch. They just really want to make sure that they're getting the right person. And I find that it's always good to share a little information about myself that relates to the information I already received about them, because that connection brings us closer together.
Great. And for you, Angela, is it similar as well? Do you have this? Do you have specific topics that you like to bring up in the intro call?
Usually I just say straight away to them, would you like me to tell you a little bit about the process, or do you want to ask me some questions? Now, I know that I already know some things about the process, but they nearly always say, you just tell us something. And it just gives them a few minutes to get used to your voice, your personality, and somehow it just kickstarts them. And suddenly they're full of questions, and it just flows naturally. So we sort of say, how would you like to have the interviews? Is there a particular time of day you'd like them in a special format? And immediately it just sort of happens, and the people, you can see them relaxing into the conversation. So we take it from there.
Wonderful. And I mentioned earlier that we also send out a questionnaire for customers to fill in so that we get a bit more information about them. From the perspective of a writer, why is that important for you, Angela?
The questionnaire is very good because it helps you to see the aims and objectives, and it gives a little bit of structure. And it does help because when the storyteller starts to share their story, you'll look back at the questionnaire and you'll think, there's something quite major on that questionnaire that you don't seem to have mentioned. Have you forgotten, or don't you want to anymore? And sometimes because it's their story, they sort of, oh, yes, I forgot to mention that bit. So thank you. So it definitely helps, and it helps them to have some structure and to know where they're going. But also it is very flexible. And some people, after all, won't want to write answers down because that's why they've asked for a writer. So we can just use those in discussion. And again, they can be adapted because obviously they're mainly about somebody wanting to start with a biography. But if you're, for example, wanting to talk about a charity, they might not be appropriate. So we can obviously tweak them. We have different questionnaires for different storytellers. But yeah, it's a guide for the customer and it's a guide for us. And it's very flexible, so it's nothing to be scared of.
Well, thank you for letting us know about that. And moving on to the next step. So step number 2 is the interviews. Once you've accepted your writer and you and your writer can plan out interview dates, the project editor will take a slight backseat in this stage because this is a really important time for the customer and the writer to really build up rapport. Rutger, how did you come up with the idea of different packages?
I wanted, first of all, to be very transparent because most people have never made a book in their life. So it's very difficult to kind of understand what goes into it and then what comes out of it. So that's why we decided to have different packages where you can see how many interview hours you get, what level of seniority your writer is, how many photos you can put in, what that means for the number of words that are in the book and how long the book is. So that was the starting point, no matter what the packages would be. We want to be super transparent. What you see is what you get. And thankfully, that's still the case. And we'll always keep it like that. And then we want to have packages to basically accommodate different budgets as well and make it really, really transparent. I would say that about a quarter of the projects we do are not any of the packages because people have special requirements. Actually, I already saw one of the questions from someone who had a special requirement. So I think we also work with people who've already written half a book sometimes, and they come to us to help finish it. So all of these things don't fit specifically in a package, and one of the team can work with a client to help turn it into a package with a lot of clarity of what it is and what it costs.
Great, thank you. And one of the unique selling points about our packages is also that we have both remote interviews and in-person interviews. Jarron, would you mind telling us about the benefits or your experience with remote interviews?
I think for me, it's easier to do a remote interview because right now, I'm interviewing somebody who lives out in California and I'm in Ohio. So it makes it easier to get that fill. And I've only actually worked with one client who lives in Ohio, about 2 hours away. So being able to work with people from different states, different backgrounds, and then it's easier to set up the times too. We can base it off of their schedule, my schedule. If you're a night owl, I don't mind staying up and doing that. But it's been a lot of fun, and there are different ways you can do it. I prefer to do it via Zoom, so I can still kind of get that face-to-face connection. But I have several clients who have trouble using technology, so it's easier for them to just do a phone call. But I let them know that we record the conversation, and I can still play it back and listen to it and take notes and get everything I need.
Wonderful, thank you. And Angela, what about you? What's your experience with in-person interviews?
Yes, in-person interviews are very lovely. You're obviously going inside the person's home usually, so you have to obviously remember that. And I always take my shoes off when I go in, and when you go in, obviously there's often a pet there, so that's quite nice. They smell my dog. I often conduct an interview with their dog on my knee, and often it's a little bit tense at first, but there's always an icebreaker. One house I went into, the cat came in with me, so when we were sat down having the interview, we both threw an icebreaker in and asked the name of the cat, at which point we both realised it was neither of our cats, because the storyteller thought I'd brought it in with me and I thought it was his cat. But yes, in person it's really nice, and what the beauty of it is that the actual storyteller gets to do most of the talking, which at first a lot of them feel guilty about, because it's natural human nature that we feel, if you're with a friend in your house, that you ask some questions about them. But when they soon sort of come to realise, no, you are meant to do most of the talking, it just flows. And you know, as a storyteller, you have to, obviously you can say the odd little point, oh yes, that's happened to me too, but it's your client's story, so you're there to listen. And it soon becomes just like going out for a coffee with a friend, and it works incredibly well in the home. And they can do sessions. There's good guidance online with the company, how many hours and sessions to do, but usually you go for about 2 hours at a time. And we have a dictaphone, and that's a very good thing. We record the interviews, and so that's good. I'm not sat making notes, can actually listen very well to the client, and they know that they're being recorded, and we just place it somewhere near so it can pick up the conversation. So it's a very relaxed time, but a very informative time, a very useful time, obviously, and it works incredibly well in the home.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much, Angela. And Rutger mentioned it before, but our packages are very flexible. So if you want to add an extra interview hours, or if you think you need more words, or you want to add an additional storyteller, all of that is a possibility. Jarron, what is your experience with having multiple storytellers? How does it differ from having one storyteller?
It can be difficult sometimes, because you want to focus on one person at a time to let them know that you're really paying attention and giving everything that they need. But because we record the interviews, it's also a little bit easier to be able to handle more than one client. When I first started, I thought I would never have more than 2 projects at a time, but I understand that not everybody is on the same timetable. So when the process is starting for the draft, sometimes everything gets backed up. So I did end up working with 5 clients at one time, but I used my schedule and worked with them, and we were able to set up different times so that I didn't feel like I was overwhelmed.
Thank you very much. And what would you say a typical interview session looks like, Angela?
Typical interview, well, if it's the first one, obviously, a good starting place, it's going to be a memoir or biography, is what is your first memory. But a lot of people don't have a memory till they're 11 or so, but that just kickstarts them to mention something like, oh, I haven't got a memory, and then you say, what's your first? And very soon, you're just looking at very first interview for a few questions to relax the client. And then a typical session after that is it just flows naturally, very naturally. You get a lot of information, and the beauty of the recording is that if you do go off on a tangent, afterwards it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You can put all the pieces together into the structure that the questionnaire, you know, from your client what they would like it to, the format it would like to be in.
Great. And what about you, Jarron? Do you have a sort of set way that you interview, or does it differ from customer to customer? What's your typical interview session look like?
I start off with going back to the questionnaire just to make sure we're getting everything that they wanted. But then I like to ask some questions that they might not typically think of. So James Lipton had his show where he did the 10 questions. So sometimes I use some of the questions from there. I find that those are great icebreakers. As far as the memories go from back when they were a child, I asked them to describe their bedroom. Name 3 things that you remember from growing up that were specific in your room. And then I like to recreate that when I'm writing the story. But I asked them about their family. I'll ask about their job. I'll ask, what are your favorite movies, just to get an idea of who they are.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And Rutger, coincidentally, you're actually writing, you're having your memoir written as well at the moment. So how do you feel in the interview process? What is it like from the storyteller's perspective?
It's really fascinating because you really get drawn into your life. I remember it's been a little bit of a while since I did the interviews, and I actually did them remotely, although I was planning to do them in person, but then the pandemic happened and the writer I chose was in a location where I sometimes go, but then I couldn't go there. Basically, it's in the US and I couldn't travel there. So we did it remotely with 8 hours time difference, and it was much better than I thought. And I remember during that period where we were doing the interviews, I was having a lot of vivid memories. So I would walk in different places and I would actually remember things from my life, just because I had been so triggered by those questions. I did feel quite exhausted after every interview, a bit like you're being interviewed for a job. And it's 1 or 2 hours really take a lot out of you, but in a good way, because you really feel like you've been brought back to different places and remember things that you didn't expect.
Great. Well, thank you for letting us know. So that's also something that I'm sure a lot of prospective customers will feel as well. Feeling like you'd be able to get it out and explain your story, and it must also feel really relieving as well, to see it all on paper. Moving on to the next stage in the process, the writing and editing stage. This stage requires a lot of teamwork and cohesion, as everyone's input is equally important. It's always an impactful part of the process, as it's the first piece of writing that the storyteller will see. The writer will usually write a sample chapter and a book outline as step number 1. This is usually an excerpt from one of the chapters. As a project editor, I'll then go through the sample chapter and book outline, provide editorial feedback and suggestions, and then allow the writer to incorporate those changes, and then we'll make it available for the customer. Angela, how do you select a sample chapter? Is it just chapter number 1, or do you have what's your experience there?
Obviously, if the storyteller asks for a specific part of the book, I would do that. But otherwise, I usually go for the first chapter, because obviously when we know ourselves as authors, that when we write something, it's that first chapter that's got to grab the interest. And so many storytellers obviously want the book to be one that you can't put down. And the stories are absolutely amazing in the first place. So do it justice by just grabbing it. So I think I always try and give the first chapter, unless they ask for something different, in the hope they realise, well, this is the book for everyone to read. Do their story justice.
Great. And what about you, Jarron? Is it the same for you?
I like to take a different approach. I usually listen back to the interview and choose the top 3 stories within the story, and I like to go from there. That way they know that whatever they think the best part of their story is, that I'm really delivering that for them.
Oh, great. And I'd also like to add to this. So as a project editor, if I see a sample chapter and I think, other chapters might also be, it might also be interesting to see how, from one side writing about the family, but then meeting your first love. Those types of stories are very different types of stories. So in the sample chapter phase, it is also possible to have smaller excerpts of two different chapters, so that you've got an idea of the different kinds of styles of writing for different types of for different types of stories. And then following on from the sample chapter, once that's been approved, the writer will then go away and write the full first draft. This is the first time that you, as the customer or the storyteller, will see the full story on paper. The project editor will then review the first draft beforehand and provide editorial feedback, and it will also get a professional proofread. The storyteller will then have a chance to give feedback too. Jarron, how does writing the first draft go for you? How do you structure it? Let us know some more information about it.
Well, I do start, even though for the sample I start anywhere in the middle, but I do start in the beginning for the draft. I listen to each interview for whatever section I'm working on. I'll listen to it probably 2 or 3 times just so I can really capture their voice. I do research about if they're talking about a story from like the 1970s. I'll do research from the area that they're in so I can really get a hold of the slang and different dialect. That way it feels like I'm taking them back to their childhood. But I like to build as I go.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Angela? How is it for you?
Yes, well, the first thing is to listen to the tapes again, and I make detailed notes from the tapes. And during the interviews, we've had a lot of discussion, and you automatically feel the vibes as well, whether they want the story in the first person or third person. And as you're writing this story, you also have picked up whether they want it very factual, if they want it creative, and if they want it to be like their voice. Because if they're writing it for a relative, they often say, I want them to hear me hear the storyteller from the pages. So I make detailed notes, and if I know that they want some of their phrases in, I will obviously choose a few to put in. Obviously, you don't want it just to be a transcript, but you do get to know, it's very magical because you get to know your customer so well. You even begin to think like they do, and you find yourself capturing some of their phrases, even dreaming about their problems and things. So it's not that difficult to write the first draft because you are really almost become a real life ghost. Well, ghosts can't be real life, can they? But you have become a ghost of that person in the nicest possible way. And you know, you can it sometimes just flows off, well, not off the pen, off your fingers onto the keyboard, because you've got to know your clients so well. So yes, the combination of listening to the recordings, which are essential and absolutely amazing help, and having listened to what your customer wants, you'll get that first draft going, and then it just happens. And of course, you've got the questionnaire to look at, and you know, even though you finish the interviews, you're constantly in touch with the storyteller by WhatsApp, email, checking out little things, story titles running, chapter titles running past them. And some of them like to get involved choosing the chapter, the title of the book. So it's a very exciting, but it works really well.
Oh, great. So it's a very cohesive thing. So, you know, you said, you know, almost a ghost of them, but almost stepping into their own, into their shoes and really feeling for what it's like to experience what they've experienced, and then writing that down. And so how does the writing style and structure differ depending on the clients you're working for? Jarron, have you got, you know, do you adapt your writing style based on the type of customer? Have you written, like, you know, funny stuff, more sad stuff? Could you give us a bit more information about that?
So I've written sad situations. I've written stuff that has more of a comedic feel to it, but I don't really change my style too much. They usually ask me to be as creative as possible. They tell me that I'm the writer and they trust me, so just go with it. So as long as I'm taking the story that they give me, it's kind of like what Angela said. You don't want it to be a transcript of the interviews. You want it to be more creative, and I just fit it in the best way I can. But I hear their voice in my head, and so when I'm typing, it's like they're talking to me and the words are just flowing out.
Great. And for Angela, can you give us an example of some of the types of stories that you captured? What kind of themes are explored?
What sort of themes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, it depends. Some people want, if it's a life story, you might just notice as you're speaking that there is a theme or a hobby that runs through. So you might want to sort of weave that through. Obviously, the storyteller, for example, is really into golf, for example. You suddenly sometimes hits you that every chapter would fit in well, and you could put a few metaphors in and have a theme of golf running through. But obviously, you'd have to check that out because that's very personal. And again, you pick up how during the interviews you pick up exactly the personality of your clients. Sometimes they want metaphors and inspirational verses, but sometimes they are very factual, and something like that would not work for them, which is we respect totally. And sometimes, quite a few times, I have written for people who are terminally ill, and again, often, well, they tell you how the story is going to go. And often it's a book about living life and full of joy and all the themes that we study. Some people write books because they find it very therapeutic, and they've got to a stage in their life they want to share whatever problem they've been with to help other people. Some people write the stories to have them published to help spread the message. Many are obviously to pass on to future generations. Some are for charities. There's all sorts of reasons people write, hobbies. Just amazing. The different books, there's a whole selection. But yes, we will discuss if they want a theme running through. And I have written several. I'm just trying to, I don't want to say too many because if the people are watching, they might, we're very good on confidentiality. So I won't say anything in case it identifies anyone.
Well, thank you, Angela. And what about you, Jarron? Do you have any specific themes that you've noticed, or types of writing that, types of themes that are recurrent, or what about you? How do you find it?
A lot of the stories end up being that the client had a difficult background, poor background, something like that, and then just where they've gone in life, the kind of success that they've had, and they want to tell a story about triumph, and that, if I can do it, anybody else can do it. And that seems to be the theme with a lot of the stories. There are some therapeutic aspects to it where it has to do with somebody who passed away. But a lot of times it's just about going from the troubled background or the poor background, and I found a way to become successful in life.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that. And Rutger, how is Bookmaker, our online platform, how is that helping to streamline this whole process?
The Bookmaker is really there, so you can find everything at any point of the project in time in one place. We used to work with a lot of emails and documents going around, and people get a lot of emails these days, and they often get lost or it's hard to find them. So in Bookmaker, you can fill out your questionnaire. Now that's one of the starting things to do. Some people do it in a lot of detail. Some people do quite high level. You can upload your photos. Initially, before you have the outline of your book, you just put them sort of in a bucket. And you can drag them, and they can come from your phone or your computer. We also have tips for people who need to digitize photos. That's outside of the Bookmaker, but just in case you were worried about that one photo you have somewhere in your home that isn't digitized, we have solutions for that. And then once the outline is there, you can read it, you can comment on it to your writer, to your editor, and you can then drag the photos into the right chapters. It's really the easiest way to kind of determine where you want which photo, because we find it really important that our books, they're there to read and for people to immerse in your story, but the photos are really adding to that. So we love it when people have 2-3 photos that really help paint a picture of a certain time, so they are placed in the right place in the book. And the same for when the draft comes out. It's really easy way to comment on it. You can also press a button and print your draft if you feel more comfortable reading it that way. So everything we do with the Bookmaker is to allow people to work in the way that they feel comfortable with, but to have a central place where they can go back and find everything.
Definitely, and I can vouch for that. It's definitely helped speed up a lot of the processes and also make sure that everything's all in one place. So that brings us on to the fourth step in the process, the design stage. So this is a really enjoyable stage in the process, as you'll get to see your book, you know, what your book looks like, how it turns out, and you'll also get a chance to take a trip down memory lane. The end product is really beautiful, and you'll certainly be pleased with that you decided to have your book written and made by us. And as Rutger mentioned, you've got the wonderful platform Bookmaker, which will help you, which will allow you to upload photographs, and your project editor will be there to help you every step of the way. So even if you're not as IT literate as others, we're here to help you. We're here to show you exactly how to do it, and we'll help you select the different types of photos that you'd like to include, and we'll also help you to go over what kind of cover you should include. For the writers, Angela, the title is one of the first things you notice when you pick up a book. Do you help the clients come up with the title, or do they choose it themselves?
I love the title choosing moment, but I don't want to pinch it off them. It is theirs. But if they don't have one and they want some help, I'm very happy to help. But I always say, well, let's wait a bit, because often it jumps out at you from the book, the title. Sometimes some story makers come with a definite title, which might be a phrase that had from their life, which means so much to them. So obviously that's fine. They've chosen the title. But sometimes it comes from a theme, and sometimes it comes from a saying that they have said, or a quote. But it is very, very important that they choose a title that when the person picks their book up, it will give a little bit of a clue, especially if they're thinking of publishing it, of what the content of the book is. But equally, as well as the main title, the chapter heading titles are quite fun, and I always like to create some quite fun ones if the customer likes it too, likes me to. So yeah, the titles are a bit of fun.
Bit of fun, fantastic. And what about you, Jarron? Do you help the customers come up with the title? Do you use a similar method to Angela? How do you pick the title? How do you help customers pick their title?
I always ask them in the beginning of the interview phase if they have a title in mind. And if they don't, I let them know that we can address it later during the writing stage, because sometimes you'll get your best title after you already start reading what's already there. So far, that's how it's worked out for me. The title comes once we start writing, but for the draft or for the outline, I'll usually put like 2 or 3 examples that they can choose from to see what they think. And a lot of times they'll tell me in the very beginning, yeah, I like that one in the middle. But sometimes it's still a working process during the draft stage.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And Rutger, you've seen many books go to print. How many books have we captured to date, and what types of photos do people tend to select as their book cover?
Well, we have thousands of books that we have created or that we're working on. We have different design templates to help people basically pick the photos that means the most to them. And then our design can we use different designs depending on whether it is a high quality modern photo, or for example, if it's more of maybe an older, less high quality photo, because that can be a photo that matters a lot to people. And we just want to help create the book that feels right, rather than that has the shiniest design. Of course, our designs, I think, are very shiny and great, but we are able to adjust to, for example, those photos. We also have a lot of flexibility, for example, to have subtitles, not just the title for the book, which people use. So we see a lot of different books. I saw a few questions around self-publishing. We also have packages to help people self-publish on Amazon, or to be in the online store of Barnes and Nobles or Waterstones. And with some of those packages, we help create what we call a commercial cover, where we go beyond using different designs with someone's photo to create something that may fit with a theme that is important in their book.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And now moving on to the fifth and final step in the process, the book delivery. This is the most exciting stage, because it's the moment that customers and you as storytellers get to receive your books. Your books will be delivered to your door and we can ship globally. As you can see from the photos in the screen, we have a wide variety of different customers. The lady in the top left gave this as a gift to her father for his 80th birthday. The man in the bottom right purchased one of our self-publishing packages and was able to get it published on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. In the bottom middle is one memoir which was given to a much loved family member at a reunion party with over 3 generations in attendance. As you can see, our books, the end product, the physical copy of everything, it's wonderful. The quality is high quality. You've got a hard cover copy and you've got a hand-stitched spine. The books can also be given at many different occasions. Rutger, what would you say is the most popular time of year or occasion for when people want to write their books?
Well, we have people that buy our product as a gift, about half, and people buying for themselves. People buy for themselves any time of the year, I would say. Now, so there isn't really a specific time. When gifts, we see big birthdays, 70th, 50th, 80th, you mentioned a few, wedding anniversaries, sort of the holiday season is big, Mother's Day, Father's Day. So it's those kind of occasions. And sometimes people feel like, for years, I haven't known what to give, mom or dad, and I've come across Story Terrace, I'm just going to give it. So there are different occasions. Sometimes people see it as a gift for themselves. They're really, we make books throughout the year. We do see that a lot of people like to finish their book in November, because then they want to have it ready for times when they see a lot of family.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely, and then it's also perfectly in time for Christmas and the holidays and the end of year holidays as well. Jarron, we're seeing that there's a growing trend in people wanting to document their stories. Why do you think now is the right time to capture a story? Why is it the most important?
I think as you see a lot of people getting older, and you might have lost a family member or something, you realize that their story can get lost with them. So you want to document that for your kids, for your grandkids, and everything.
And what do you think, Angela? Do you think that that it's important to capture a story as soon as possible?
Definitely. I mean, from a personal view, I've got regrets I didn't capture my parents' stories or my godmothers. You have busy lives, you go and visit them, and something might come up, like they might tell you, for example, when they were an evacuee during the war, and then something happens, a child comes in from football practice, the conversation gets changed about how many goals they got, and you never finish that conversation, and you wish you had. And so many times now, I think my godmother, who died at 97, had a fantastic life as a nursing career. I wish I'd captured it. And every story is important. Sometimes people are gifted stories. Some of my customers have said, oh, but my life's so boring. And it's not. Honestly, every story, every life is just so interesting and is worth capturing. It really is.
Definitely, I fully agree. I wish that I had a book of my grandparents' stories as well. Fortunately, I've only got one grandparent left, so it would have been great to have heard their stories, find out what life was like for them, and to also read the book from their perspective as well. So Rutger, do you have any final thoughts on the process and how everything is at Story Terrace?
Not really. I think it can be a little bit daunting for people. I know from like my family members, that on the one hand, people want to do it, and they know that people around them want to have the stories, and they find it exciting, but also a little bit daunting. Is my life going to be reflected well? I'm going to have to talk about some things maybe I don't want to talk about. But I think I can say, hands down, that people ultimately really enjoy the experience. It's a very private experience that we created with your ghostwriter, where you have the time to talk about different things in your life, but you can still take them out, or you change the wording because it's your book. We're not pushing for any content or any way to describe anything. We're there to help you in that process, but ultimately clients are decision makers. So I hope people don't procrastinate, because that's very common with writing books. About 2/3 of the people would like to write their story once in their life, but I think only a few % of the people will do it. So I hope we can create a much bigger percentage in the future with storytellers, and that everyone on the call will be a part of that.
Definitely, I fully agree. Angela, Jarron, do you have anything else you wish to add?
Sometimes,
go ahead, Angela.
I was just going to say, sometimes you have a couple are gifted a present, say, for example, for a golden wedding. And that's really interesting because you've got to make sure that both get to tell a story, because obviously someone might want to speak more than the other. And we always make sure that both tell a story, but often it's a joint story, and just encouraging them to work together. And sometimes we have people who the memories are fading and relatives want to capture the story before the memory fades too much, and they're a little bit worried that the memory has already faded too much. But we can work to help with that. For example, if they are talking about stories during the war and their memory has faded, or from an era, similar era, I've worked with so many people from those situations that you will say, well, did you used to have this skipping song, or did you used to play this game? And something will light, and we can find ways to actually bring back quite a few memories that have been a little bit hard to retrieve. So it's never too late, really, to do the book.
Definitely, it's definitely never too late, and it's always a good time to start when you're still fit and ready and you still can. Jarron, what were you going to say? You also wanted to add something.
Sometimes the project that the client had in mind changes at the very beginning of the interview process. One client, they had an idea for a story about their love story with their wife, and then they quickly realized they couldn't tell the story by themselves, so they asked if it was okay for their spouse to join them and tell them the story. And I think it created a better story and made a more fun interview process as well, just hearing the different their different ideas and what one thought happened and the other one thought something else happened. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, because I can imagine the different perspectives. Everyone remembers a story in a specific way, but when you've got two sides of the same coin and then putting it into a book, it must be an interesting one to work on.
Yes.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the webinar. So thank you very much today for joining us today. And I hope it was informative. And thank you to our wonderful panel, Rutger, Jarron, and Angela. We'll leave this slide on so that you can jot down the contact information, and our team will be on hand to answer any remaining questions that you have in the chat. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. And if you've already started your own writing, process, then please get in touch with us as well, because I'm sure that we've got a range of packages that would be best suited for you as well. If you want to request a free consultation, you can find out more about how your needs and how we can about your needs and how we can accommodate them. Please feel free to get in touch by email. And also we'll post the link to our Terrace website in the chat so that you can click through that and have a look at the different packages that we offer and self-publishing, and just get to know the company a little bit better as well. And also a friendly reminder, at the end of the webinar, we'll be sending out a feedback form. And if you're able to fill that in, you'll also receive a discount on some of our packages as well. I look forward to hopefully working with some of you in the near future. And thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.